What's going on, guys? This is Rob. If you guys enjoy my content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that little bell so you never miss out on my sexy voice. What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and before we start this video, I just want to let you guys know I can't really go into any detail about it, but there's something coming down the line that's going to be pretty awesome, assuming that it all goes well and it goes the way that I would want it to. It's going to be pretty damn awesome. It'll be the greatest honor this channel has had since its inception. It'll be pretty sweet. But in this video, I want to cover this Batman one-shot. So Batman comics, I mean, most people know this by now, but Batman comics are always usually dark and brooding. And every once in a while, you need a story that can break the monotony. That's really kind of the essential thing about Batman comics. You need a story that's able to break away from being so dark and make things interesting and intriguing. And so in this one, we're covering the return of a few characters, Crazy Quilt, and of course, Condiment King. And it's kind of told in like a series of flashbacks. And it's a really, really cool moment here because it focuses a lot on Dick Grayson. And really, it focuses on Dick Grayson and his relationship to Bruce Wayne. And this is kind of an important thing because one of the things to bear in mind with DC Rebirth, and this is one of the reasons why what DC is doing right now is so effective, is because this is the jumping on platform for a lot of people. And so for a lot of people who are getting into DC Comics, they haven't been reading for 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, or even, as many as 40 or 50 years, depending on how old, you might be if you're watching this video. And so with this being the new point for them, it's really kind of difficult to sort of imagine what things were like with Dick Grayson when he was a kid and he was brought in by Bruce Wayne. And so what this does is this basically picks up with Crazy Quilt. And Crazy Quilt is exactly what you would expect, a crazy guy in a quilt. And it's hilarious. Because you have Dick Grayson who's watching this whole thing unfold as Nightwing, and he's just kind of like, wait, so what's this guy's deal? This guy does what now? And the guy's kind of going on, and he's like, I have my quilt of colors, and with these colors I will hypnotize you, and you will bend to my whim. And the whole time the guy's just a goof, right? He looks like a character directly out of like the old Adam West Batman show, and no one takes him seriously. But like he wants to be taken seriously, right? Like the whole time he's like, mine, you're going to be mine. And Dick Grayson's like hung up on this idea that this guy has like a fetish for like quilting, but this guy is like a B or a C or like a G list villain at best. Like that's that's the best he could ever possibly be. And it's kind of funny because he's like, when I emit these colors, you're going to bend to my whim. And Dick Grayson's response is, well, maybe we'll just like close our eyes and then just like beat the crap out of you while all that's going on. It's kind of a funny little moment here because this is like old school Batman storytelling, right? Like this is like 1960s Batman meets like the modern age characters, right? Like you take a story from back in the 60s and you say, what would happen if the story was written, the story that was written in the 60s was written now, but it contained the versions of the characters that we know now as opposed to the ones that we knew back then that were silly and goofy. And this is what you'll get. Now, the other half of this is kind of jumping to the flashback when Dick Grayson was taken in by Bruce following the death of his parents. And one of the big misconceptions people have is that at the outset, that it was just kind of like a new home and everything was swell. The cool thing about this is that it shows that it's not, that Dick Grayson didn't want to be there. Dick Grayson didn't like Bruce Wayne. He didn't like not being home. Now, in reality, it's him just kind of lashing out in an environment that he's not wildly familiar with, that for him, it's not his home. And it's one of those things where it's like, I want to go back home. I want to go back and see my parents. But in truth, Dick Grayson knows as a kid, there's no coming back from that. He's crossed a line that he can't come back from. His parents are dead. And all he has now is Bruce Wayne. And so kind of lashing out in that regard is so intriguing because when you look at Dick himself, when you look at Dick Grayson himself, one of the things that people, that a lot of newer readers don't really realize is that Dick Grayson is one of those characters that like all the superheroes in the DC universe know and love. Like everybody likes Dick Grayson because in a world of darker heroes, really with the exception of Superman, Dick Grayson's like the bright shining star of the superhero community. And so when it comes to this whole thing, that's why Dick Grayson is so popular, because he's the one guy that just keeps on looking and believing, well, things will just get better. He's a great compliment to the character of Bruce. And so from here, there's this instance, this really, really great moment when Bruce Wayne and Alfred go to feed lunch to Dick Grayson. And Dick, they're like, hey, here's cucumber sandwiches. And Dick Grayson hates them. Now, he doesn't really know how to come to grips with this situation, that his life has changed irrevocably. And so he just kind of lashes out. This whole place sucks. This whole place stinks. I don't like this place. And it's kind of interesting because it's designed to sort of compare where he was in relation to Bruce to where he is now. And this is when we transition to Condiment King. Now, as anybody will tell you, Condiment King is probably the greatest villain ever created in the history of comic books. The question is why? Because he is a guy that literally shoots you with condiments. He shoots you with like ketchup and mustard. And like, I mean, he's killed people before, but like, he's amazing. Dude, I love Condiment King. Dude, Condiment King is so cool. Dude, I love Condiment King. Batman the Animated Series. I love Condiment King. That's where like 99.999% of people who have heard of his character heard of him from, was Batman the Animated Series, when he was just like running around with these little guns that shot like ketchup and mustard. And it was kind of cool. Of course, he didn't shoot mayonnaise because as most anybody will tell you, mayonnaise sucks. But like it's cool to see this whole thing, you know, like it's interesting here. I mean, now, of course, there are rules here. I mean, Condiment King, as he will tell you, you know, that it's reasonable to make the statement that mustard goes on hot dogs and ketchup goes on hamburgers. We know that as a universal truth, right? You never put ketchup and mustard on a hamburger. You don't do that. It doesn't work that way. You know, it's like putting pineapple on pizza. It's just something you don't do. You could, but then at that point we have to exile you from society. And so this funny thing, Condiment Man like hits him in the face, hits Dick Grayson in the face with a tomato, and then that's when Dick Grayson gets pissed. But it's one of these things where like Batman's dark and brooding all the time, and Dick Grayson's idea is, dude, you just kind of have to laugh every once in a while. You have to let loose. You have to cry every once in a while, man. You can't be upset all the time. You know, and it's like, this is Condiment King, man. He's not a dude that you take seriously. And Batman's like, oh, yes, he is. He's killed people and stuff. It's like, yeah, but like the guy shoots condiments at you. How could you possibly take this seriously? And so it's kind of a funny thing, because kind of jumping back to the past, again, it's another scenario where Dick Grayson doesn't really like being in Wayne Manor, but the longer he's there and the more he comes to grips with the fact that he can't go back, the more he begins to accept it. And in this acceptance, he begins to find a middle ground with Bruce Wayne, where he goes through and tries to like swing, tries to treat a chandelier like a trapeze, and it comes crashing to the ground. His response is, well, I'm a flying Grayson. That's what flying Graysons do. And so with Bruce trying to talk to him and trying to reason with him, the idea of Bruce was to approach him more as like a guardian of sorts, as opposed to trying to relate. But when Bruce does start to relate, that's when he starts to open up. When he says, look, I lost my parents too, and maybe we can talk about this and come to terms together so we can understand where the other's coming from. That's the switch. That's the moment where everything begins to shift for Dick, and he begins to look at Bruce Wayne as a father figure. But it's interesting here, because where the father of Bruce was, by all standards of measurement in terms of comic book storytelling, a great father, Bruce is very closed off. He's very shut off, and he doesn't really know how to open himself up to other people. And so for him, this is as much of a big of a step for Bruce as it is for the character of Dick Grayson. And that's why, if I'm being honest here, that's why Dick Grayson, I would argue, is probably the single most important character in the Batman mythos. While Alfred is Bruce Wayne's voice, his conscience, his voice of reason in the back of his head saying, you probably shouldn't do that, Dick Grayson is the one that makes him human. And that's what's so cool. That's what's so interesting. He's the one that kind of anchors Bruce Wayne to reality. And you see it manifest every once in a while. Like we saw that with the death of Jason Todd, right? You know, death in the family. Jason Todd dies, and then Batman begins to go on this crazy scenario where he begins to lose his mind and become more and more extreme. And when Tim Drake begins to realize, or basically picks up on the fact that Bruce is Batman and Dick Grayson is Robin, he goes to Dick Grayson and says, you have to stop being Nightwing and you have to go back to being Robin. That's the one he approaches. Now, the other reason for that is because Jason Todd was the only other Robin besides Dick Grayson at the time, but it still makes sense that like he would go to him and say, you have to anchor him back, you have to bring him back here and help him rediscover who he needs to be. And even like these scenarios where Dick Grayson's sitting on a couch and he's watching a football game, when Bruce Wayne sits down, he's always kind of like distant. Batman doesn't really seem to be human. He seems more alien than like Superman. Anything that makes us a human, like laughing and joking and being in love and all this kind of stuff, Bruce Wayne doesn't have any of those things. And so when Dick Grayson's sitting down and he's talking to him, Dick Grayson's like, yeah, man, let's watch the game, dude. Let's check out the game. And Bruce is just kind of like, yeah, but we have stuff to do. But it doesn't even put off the air of like a human saying that. It's like a robot saying that, an automaton saying that. And then we end up finding out the idea of the chips that Dick Grayson's eating, and the reason why he and Bruce share them is because that's when they really began to sort of mend this rift. That when Dick Grayson was a kid, all he wanted was potato chips. Now, of course, as we know, Alfred is like the only real responsible human being in Wayne Manor. And so he's kind of like, the kid can't eat nothing but potato chips all the time. And so Bruce is like, but like he likes potato chips though. And Alfred's like, yeah, but he needs a meal. It's like, yeah, but like he likes chips. So like, let the kid have chips. Let the kid eat some chips. And so it's a funny moment. It's a great touching moment, a great way to sort of show how these two characters came together, you know, how these two guys begin to relate. And Batman kind of lets his guard down for a second. When Dick Grayson's going through and he's like, hey, I'm going to bounce this thing off, 37 times or whatever it is. I'm going to make a bet, I'll bet you a penny that I can do it. Batman kind of goes along with it and it's like, I don't really bet, but okay, whatever. Dick Grayson pulls it off and Batman, kind of laughs for a second, and then he starts to cry. And it's like, you know, and as soon as that happens, the mask immediately comes back on, and it's back to business as usual. It's back to Bruce Wayne being Bruce Wayne. But like, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful, touching moment because it tells us there's a human in there somewhere. And the way that Batman's always been written is this the pain of loss, because he's always only ever lost things. He constantly loses things all the time. And so if anything, I would argue here that in this instance, when you take this for what it is, Batman's more of a coward. It's easier to just close himself off from humanity than it is to accept the fact that sometimes you just lose things. That's just the way the world works. That as you get older, things get taken from you. It's just how it happens, and there's nothing you can really do about it. And so it's a great thing here. It's just great storytelling. It's incredibly good storytelling here, because following this you know, experience with Bruce and Dick Grayson, you know, with Bruce opening up to Dick and saying, look, like, I lost my parents, we should talk about this. Dick Grayson begins to open up to Bruce Wayne, and in doing so, Bruce Wayne begins to take him under his wing so that he will become Robin. It is so cool. It's just damn good storytelling. And the Batman comics need this every once in a while. Every once in a while, you got to break away from like the end of times, the death of some character, Gotham is a nightmare and everything is in terrible shape. You got to move away from that, and you got to go through and you got to tell stories periodically that say, hey, things aren't necessarily that bad all the time. Sometimes they're pretty good. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. I'm kind of curious to see what kind of answers you guys give, because you guys offer some really insightful conversation when you want to. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you enjoy this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.